The following is a presentation of the Eagles Sports Network.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome into episode 6 of Mossy Creek Conversations. I'm Michael Watchring, and today we have a very special guest. He's former Carson-Newman baseball player. He'll be inducted into the Carson-Newman Hall of Fame in February of 2021. He's an 11-year big league veteran. He is Steve Cishek. Steve, how's everything going? How you been?
Everything's great, Michael. Thank you for having me on.
So we've actually talked a couple times before. We talked, I think, in 2013 and 2017. So we have covered some things in previous conversations. I'll be sure to link that on our website so people can watch some of the conversations that we've had in the past. The one thing that I noticed that I haven't asked, nor was asked in 2011 when you did an online Q&A, was how did the Carson-Newman opportunity even come about in the first place living in Massachusetts?
Yeah, great question. I had some help. That's for sure. I was, looking for a liberal arts school. Preferably in the South. There was always a rumor that, for baseball, Southern coaches are looking for Northern arms because we're less used. We don't play year round. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it worked out in this case. I was getting some help from a coach named Tom O'Connell, who's from New Jersey, who knew Coach Griff really well. And so, he gave me a list of schools that he recommended. Most of them were Division II or III, a couple of D1s, but that didn't work out. And, I wanted to go down south and kind of just experience, what life was like down there. And I was actually pretty close to choosing Bryant University in Rhode Island. They were D1 turning D2 at the time. And it was a business school though. So I knew nothing about business. I didn't know actually what I want to do. I just liked PE and I wanted to coach someday. So I was like, all right, I'll be a PE teacher. So now I have to look for a liberal arts school. Anyways, I got a whole list of schools. It was impressive from Coach Tom. And Carson-Newman was on there. And he, like I said, recommended it because of Coach Griff. Thought it'd be a good fit. And then there was another school in North Carolina called Barton College. So I came down my senior year, I think it was, in the fall of my senior year, visited Carson-Newman, met with Coach Griff and Coach Acord, who was the head coach at the time. Really liked what I saw, and they were very disciplined, especially with academics, which is something that I knew I needed being a young kid. And Barton College kind of didn't really have that. The coach was kind of like, do your own thing and just more concerned about baseball. So because of the integrity that Coach Griff and Coach Acord showed is the reason why I ended up coming to Carson-Newman. And I didn't really get any looks anywhere else. No one was really interested, nor were they interested in my recruiting tape I made of myself. So, yep.
So with that in mind, then, give me the scouting report on a freshman, 6'4", 180-pound Steve Cishek.
Well, when I was at Carson-Newman, back then it was VHS tapes, right? So there was still a VHS tape of my recruiting tape that the guys would put in and just die laughing because I was like super nervous, super shy. I'm like, I hope I hit 84 miles an hour someday. So I came in about 6'5", probably 175, just real skinny. And I topped out at 84 miles an hour, maybe on a really good day. I'd probably sit 78 to 82 my freshman year of that fall anyways. So if you go into my first outing in my college career, I hit 92 out of nowhere, just through hard work and never really trained before, never been pushed hard in my life. And Coach Griff, Coach Acord, and our pitching coach, Brad Schrock, really pushed us hard. And I think I was just a late bloomer. I just needed that extra work ethic.
So you touched on it a little bit there. Talk us through your progression because having been here for the last 7 or 8 years and watching fall camp, Griff obviously, and the way that Carson-Newman, and as you mentioned, the discipline, they'll push you a little bit to make sure that you get the most out of your skills. So what was your progression like, and when did you first sense that you had turned a corner and you could really be something special?
Sure. Before I came to Carson-Newman, we got kind of like a checklist of what we're going to be doing conditioning wise, which I've never I mean, I've run before, like I played basketball, but never really like pushed myself. I was always coached into doing it. So I remember like calculating what my 1.5 mile run would be if I ran a lap around our high school track, and just, calculated what my final time would be if I were to continue running, but I only ran one lap. That was the extent of my conditioning. I was just too lazy. And so when we got there, day one of conditioning, we ran 2 300-yard shuttles, which are absolutely miserable. And I've never done it before. And I thought I was going to die after the first one. So we had to run another one. And then he lined us back up again because our stools weren't lined up properly in the locker room. He wanted everything. They wanted to focus on those small things, the intangibles. So I know that now. But so we had to run a third one. And I seriously, like, I remember running my third one, like falling down. Like half an hour later, we had a meeting in the weight room, and I could barely pick my head up. And Coach Griff is like yelling at me to sit up straight. I'm like, my head's ringing. I'm so out of shape. Anyways, so I had that. That was my work ethic coming in. And so I learned a lot from day one that these guys are going to push you. You're going to have to be disciplined. You have to focus on the little things. And at the end of the day, it's going to make you that much stronger. And so I did that. And when Brad Schrock, the pitching coach, had a plan, I focused on it to a T. All of us did. And his philosophy was to create arm strength. We're going to long toss pretty much almost every day, if not every other day. You're throwing everything pretty much as hard as you can, unless you have an injury. Even if you're sore, you're still getting through it. And that's, like I said, it's nothing I've ever done before. On top of that, the weight training, which I've never really done before, and then the conditioning, of course. So within like 3 months, I was becoming a different athlete. I was just a late bloomer, never been exposed to this stuff. And it paid off. My freshman year, like I said, I came in my first game against Augusta State. They were like 14th in the nation. And I think I threw like the 6th or 7th inning, maybe the 8th. And it was a pretty close ball game. I came out of the game. I didn't record a single out with the bases loaded. And so the game's on the line. Thankfully, they brought in another guy, and he got out of it somehow. It was Chris Gillis. And but I remember being taken out of the game. I was super disappointed. Like, man, I've never felt that good before. Like the ball was coming out of my hand like I've never experienced. And Schrock came up and just gave me a high five. I'm like, for what? I just came out with the bases loaded, no outs. He goes, you hit 92 on the gun. Like, where did that come from? I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, I was warming up in the pen. The glove was popping. I've never felt that before in my life. I think I've never experienced adrenaline like that. And all in one day, it just kind of clicked. And from that point on, like, I was, things started to take off. My next outing was against Kennesaw State, who was the top 10 team in the nation. I hit 94 out of nowhere. And, so on and so forth. I just had an amazing experience my freshman year, and it just kind of propelled me to where I am today even.
So with that in mind, your pitching style, you're more of a sidearm pitcher. When was the first time that you tried that, and why did you try it?
So the first time I actually analyzed video was my freshman year in college. A lot of this stuff happened my freshman year. I've never really focused on how I threw, and I didn't realize that I was a low 3/4 arm slot. So I was taller in my delivery in college than I am now. I'll get to that in a moment. But when I was in high school, I was trying to mimic Derek Lowe. I wanted his sinker. And then somehow I came out looking sort of like what I look like today, nothing like Derek Lowe. So I think just over time, like I said, I was taller in my delivery in college. I was a low 3/4. And then over time throughout my professional career, they tried to change your arm slot. They tried to get me to throw higher. It didn't work. I got killed my second year in pro ball. So they let me go back to my natural arm slot. And over time, it just kind of got lower and lower just by mistake. I think when you get called up to the major leagues, they don't care about your rest as much as they say they do, especially a young guy. I was going in to clean up innings that didn't matter, right? Because they don't trust you in big situations yet. So I was throwing a ton, and I was throwing well, though. So over time, the manager, Jack McKeon, kept putting me in bigger situations. And then next thing I know, I'm closing ball games. I'm throwing a lot. So I'm trying to keep the ball down. My arm slot just kept getting lower and lower. And that's kind of what I attribute it to. It became natural for me.
So we've talked about your freshman year and how much you changed in that freshman year. Well, when was the first time that you really thought that you had a chance to be in the conversation of any level of pro ball, much less the big leagues?
Yeah, again, it was kind of my freshman year because that's the first time a scout even poked their head out to watch me pitch. In D2 level too, is when you start. We don't get as much exposure, if we're being honest. As a D1 school. So there was a scout. I think it was for the Braves. I wish I remembered his name. He'd come down and watch me and another guy, Matt Teague, throw. Quite a bit. If Teague was pitching, usually I was coming in to close the game out, especially. Our junior year or my junior year, his senior year, Teague would start, go 6-7 innings. I'd finish the rest. So there's always scouts to watch both of us pitch. So my freshman year, scouts started showing up just a little bit, but by my junior year, I mean, it got crazy a couple of games. I remember just, there's the family and stuff we had up in the stands, and right behind home plate, there was 20 to 30 radar guns aiming at us, me and Teague watching us throw. So it was pretty cool.
So you mentioned the fact that you don't get as much exposure at the Division II level. How would you describe what it was like to know that scouts were there, in essence, to watch, like you said, you and Matt Teague, and maybe a little bit of the pressure on you, knowing that this might be the only time one of these scouts gets a chance to see you, so you better have a really good outing so that they see your potential?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of pressure, but that's something I enjoyed it, because whenever I realized, again, I'm learning how to deal with this adrenaline, right? I've never experienced it. I grew up in Falmouth, Massachusetts. We have our parents that come to the games, and that's it. I mean, Carson-Newman was sort of similar. There's a lot of parents and stuff with their students and everything, but then you add the element that this could, you're trying to show what you have in front of scouts. My heart was pumping. So I had to learn right then and there to calm those nerves down and to just go out there and forget about them and just remember that I'm out there for the name, the logo of my jersey, Carson-Newman. I represent the school more than anything, and I try to keep that simple mindset. But I'd be lying if I said to you I wasn't nervous, during those outings.
Baseball to me is the ultimate equalizer sport, because there's a story like you out there that can make it to the big leagues and have a great deal of success in the big leagues. If you play basketball, odds are by the time you hit high school, people know if you have that potential to make it to the NBA. The same kind of goes in hockey, and then the NFL. You do get some of those stories of the obscure colleges getting players to the NFL and having nice careers. But baseball is one where you could throw 78 as a freshman and then all of a sudden ratchet it up to the mid-90s by the time that you get drafted. For fellow baseball players out there, younger kids that are expecting, well, I better get an SEC offer, I better get a Pac-12 offer, and if I don't get that, and if I don't get drafted coming out of high school, I have no chance. What advice would you give kids like that in similar situations like you that are just looking for a place to play and get that opportunity and seize it to make the most out of their potential?
I think it's a very important question. And I've encouraged a lot of guys, especially locally here in Florida, because that happens. I mean, if you're a Florida kid, your parents are going to push you to a D1 scholarship because that's what they think. That's the only way to get in. No, that's not true at all. Like if you have the talent and you're able to just repeat that over and over again, you're gonna be exposed no matter what. I mean, Carson-Newman is in Jefferson City, Tennessee. I love it there, but let's be honest, are scouts going to flock to Jefferson City, or they can go to Knoxville and watch the UT guys? Well, we happen to have two guys that were throwing a ball, really well, me and Matt Teague. So they know, once they see one guy throw that they think has potential, it's just word of mouth. It goes around, and so no matter where you're at, you're going to get exposure at some level. And if you keep showing up, you keep throwing hard, you keep working out hard, and you keep just putting up good numbers, you're going to get exposed. The scouts are going to come find you no matter where you're at. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of D2, D3 guys that I played with in the major leagues that had a similar route as me. They were just hoping to play somewhere. And for the record, I believe it's a gift of God to be able to throw the baseball like we do at that level. They were gifted naturally. Then they put in a work ethic to, build up those gifts. And then sure enough, they found their way to the top. It's an unconventional route, but if you have the talent, you will be found and you will have an opportunity for sure.
So I think we talked about this maybe in 2017 about the draft day call, getting the call from then the Florida Marlins in the 5th round. Can you walk us through maybe that entire process, what it was like to get the call, what it was like to put pen to paper, start in the organization, and what it was like maybe that first year out of college to get prepared for professional baseball?
Yeah. After my junior year, we got knocked out by University of Tampa in the regionals, and everyone's kind of going home. There's a couple of guys that stuck around, and I had to do some showcases. I did one for the White Sox of all teams, where I got to go to what it was U.S. Cellular back then. It's now Guaranteed Rate. So it's kind of funny. I threw in that bullpen in 2007, and then this year, and then I also threw at Turner Field for the Braves, which was incredible. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. So then the June of that year comes around. So that's kind of how it works. You can do tryouts if they request you to do that. June comes around, it's draft day, and I've dial-up internet, and so it's the first year they're televising the first round of baseball draft. They've never done it before. I remember these little things. And I'm sitting in my living room. We have a neighbor over, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, Marissa, was there. And we're just watching the draft board go down on the internet. And we got a phone call in the 5th round by the White Sox saying, "Hey, we're going to take you with the next pick." The scout that was, working on getting me. I was like, wow, this is really happening. Sure enough, the White Sox come around. They take Nate Jones, who's a big leaguer. He's had a phenomenal career, so it worked out for them. I'm like, this is weird. Like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, my name pops up on the Marlins list, and they select me, which is weird because I didn't really talk to the Marlins all that much. I knew Keith Ryman was around a lot. I was really good friends with his son Blake, and he was a Marlins scout. We talked, of course, but I didn't know if they showed that much interest. And so I was just stoked. I mean, we were flying around, I was hugging everybody. And it was just an unbelievable experience. And I was like, I just want to know where I was going next. Like, I didn't anticipate the Marlins picking me. Like, where are they going to send me? Where's their single A baseball team? Like, let's go. And it was in Jamestown, New York. And so I think it was like a week later, a couple of days later, I had to go fly down to Jupiter, Florida, do my physical, and then go home. And I drove to Jamestown, and then started my first professional season in short season A ball in Jamestown, New York.
So you mentioned short season A ball. Well, as much as people sometimes would like to think, and how things have gone these days, where there's a fast track to the big leagues, you spent 3 years in A ball via low A and then high A, 112 minor league games at A ball over 3 years. How would you define that experience during that time?
I mean, it was awesome. College, I feel like college kind of prepared me for that, because when I went to college, had I got drafted out of high school, which wouldn't have been possible. Like I said, I was throwing like 84 tops. Had I been drafted, I would have been a mess. Like college, especially, like I said, the discipline aspect of baseball with Coach Griff and Coach Acord, prepared me for this. And so, we were living on our own. It was like having roommates like you had in college, but we lived in a house, and, I was just ready to go. I've never really pitched against wood bats too much, but it was like a game changer for me. Like I had a blast throwing inside on guys, because at that level they couldn't really get to it. And I was trying to break their bats. You can't really do that with a metal bat in college. So it was awesome. I mean, the whole experience was great. Just getting to go to all these little towns and play baseball, just kind of prepared you along the way. That's where you deal with adversity, I think, is the biggest thing, right? Because like I said, my second year in pro ball, they tried to raise my arm slot, and I got killed, and I didn't know how to deal with it. It's the first time I had really faced adversity in baseball. So I learned a lot that year. In that off season, I pushed myself harder than ever, and next thing you know, and I started working out at this place called Cressy Sports Performance, just trying to give myself the best opportunity. I ended up repeating high A in Jupiter, Florida. I got called up to Double A, struggled, sent down, and then I started pitching well. I just found my groove, and then got called up. We won the Double A championship, and then as I'm driving home, I think it was Andrew Miller went like 2/3 of an inning in the big leagues. I was driving home. They said, "Hey, we need an extra arm. Where are you?" I was like, "Not far, not too far. I'm in Georgia. I'm going to turn right back around and come back." So it was incredible.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I think that was your fourth full big league or pro season, 2010. You were able to shoot up and get to the big leagues. I was going to ask what the call was like, but you obviously just answered that. You go into your first game. I don't know how much you remember about your first game. I looked it up. Your first career outing, September 26th, 2010. You were in Milwaukee. You threw 2 flawless innings of baseball. You faced Casey McGee, Lorenzo Cain, and then Craig Counsell. What do you remember about day one on the mound in the big leagues?
Oh man, it's very memorable. This is going to sound terrible, but I feel like I have to share the story. I remember going into the game. Actually, let me backtrack. When I was up there, I didn't go into a baseball game for a week, okay, which was a blessing in disguise because I was so nervous. I was walking on eggshells. I never even been to big league camp before, and here I am sitting in my lockers next to Josh Johnson, who's like one of the best pitchers in baseball. So I was freaking out. So we go to Milwaukee. 2 friends from Carson-Newman on the baseball team actually met me out there, Gavin Scroggins and Chris Cameron. And, it was incredible. As the game, I think it was the second game of the series, one of my buddies in Double-A ball went in, and we were pumped for him. Well, he didn't record a single out, gave up 6 runs and back-to-back homers to Ryan Braun and Prince Fielder. So I was like, dude, I know that was a bad outing, but congratulations, you pitched in the show. That's amazing. And so we were laughing about it. Well, the next day, same thing happened. We're getting crushed, of course. And, the phone rings. I'm like, oh my goodness, this might be my spot. And sure enough, they say my name. And as I warm up, I was super nervous. And as I'm running out there, I was like, you know what? It can't go as bad as that last outing I witnessed yesterday. So whatever, let's just let it happen. Let's let it eat. And so I just went out there with just let it fly and just to see what happens. And I went 6 up, 6 down. It was crazy.
Yeah, you didn't strike out a batter. I think you had a few ground outs, a fly out or 2 in there as well. After you experienced that, I think you pitched maybe the 6th and the 7th, or it wasn't the end of the game by that point in time. What do you remember about that evening? Did you make any phone calls? Did you talk to anybody about what that opening experience was like?
Yeah, I mean, we had apparently back at home they had a watch party at a local sports bar / pizzeria, and so they've been waiting for a few days to see if I was getting in a ball game. They're like, come on, dude. And sure enough, I got in, and I called my parents right away after the game. They were ecstatic. They were still there, I think, with everybody, and you could hear them all celebrating. And my wife, my girlfriend then, and now wife, was there. And it was incredible just to hear their perspective and how nervous they were. I'm like, you guys were more nervous than I was. I was like, it almost felt natural kind of being out there. You always dream of that moment as a kid, and so you just go out there and enjoy it. Yeah. So it's cool to have those conversations after the game.
So you pitched a couple games that season. As you mentioned, the rosters expand at that point in the year, and you get a couple games of experience. But it takes another season or 2 until you can fully solidify a spot in the Marlins bullpen. What was the experience like for you after getting that big league experience and then going into Major League camp the next year as you're battling it out for a spot on the Marlins full season roster the next year?
Sure. I mean, it was huge, because even after my first out, Casey McGee, who I ended up playing with, and we actually talked about that at bat. I mean, he swung and hit a ball straight into the ground, and our catcher threw him out. And after that, I'm like, oh yeah, these guys put their shoes on the same way I do. I can do this, So I kind of carried that mentality into spring training the next year, just to, stay focused, just, pick the spot and throw it to it. And whatever happens after that, whatever happens. It's in the Lord's hands. So, I didn't make the team out of camp in 11, but I kind of figured I wouldn't. I only threw 4 innings in 2010. So I started out in AAA, but really having that experience kind of propelled me forward, knowing that, I can pitch at the level for sure.
So I looked at one of the interviews that you did before the beginning of this year, and I was going to ask you, because I'm a big baseball card collector, memorabilia person, and you were asked what your favorite piece of memorabilia was, and you answered that it was your World Baseball Classic jersey from 2013. Yeah. How did you get that phone call, and what was the experience like playing for Team USA just a few years into your pro career?
Yeah, I was at home in Falmouth, Massachusetts. I was still staying with my parents, and I think I was engaged to Marissa at the time. And I was just watching TV at night, and I got a phone call from Los Angeles, California. And I'm like, I knew I put my name on a list. I was like, oh my goodness, this is Joe Torre. And so I answered the phone. Sure enough, it was Joe Torre. He introduced himself, and I'm like, unbelievable. This is crazy. And he asked me if I was still interested in playing. I said, of course. I'm going to talk to the Marlins first, but yes, mark me. And they're going to say yes, because technically they couldn't tell me no. And but just to be respectful. And it was almost like being drafted all over again. Like you're telling me I get to wear USA across my jersey and go out and pitch against other countries, and this is going to be insane. And to this day, we still talk about it. I played with Ross Detweiler in Chicago this year, and he was on the team, and we were still looking up highlights of that series and just kind of going down memory lane. It was only 7 years ago, but still, like, it felt like so much longer ago. And it was the best baseball experience I've ever had, is representing your country. And so it's something I'll never forget.
So if that's number one, what's the number two memory that you have so far from your big league career?
Man, that's tough. Other than being drafted, well, it's not big league career. I would say making it to the playoffs with the Cubs. In 2015, I was with the Cardinals. We made the playoffs, but I didn't make the roster. So I just kind of got real hungry after that. I'm like, I was just really disappointed in myself that I hadn't pitched better. And so I really pushed myself that offseason. Didn't make the playoffs. We missed by 2 games when I was with the Mariners, which hurt a lot. The next year, we were fighting for a playoff spot with Tampa. I got traded to Tampa for hopeful playoff contention, and we didn't make it. And then when the Cubs signed me, I'm like, this is legit my chance. Like, we got to do this. So, while those guys were coming off a World Series ring 2 years prior, I knew I had a shot. So that season I was just locked in, probably the most locked in I've ever been. And so we made the wild card, which was disappointing because I thought we had a lot better team than, just being a wild card contender. But I remember going into that game felt a lot like the World Baseball Classic with all the weight on your shoulders. And we were down 1. There was a runner on first. I'm facing DJ LeMahieu, who's probably the Rockies' best hitter, if not second best behind Arenado, and got him into a double play. And I just remember that place and Wrigley Field was just rocking. It was incredible.
So you mentioned your time with the Cubs. One thing that I found interesting about your career, and I guess maybe that's one of the worst things about being a reliever, is a lot of teams see that as something that can be expendable if they're out of the race. So you've been traded twice. You've signed as a free agent on 3 different occasions, and something that wasn't really an issue during your college days that is now is social media. Rumors dominate the conversation, I feel like, with hot stove and everything like that. As a player, how do you sift through the social media noise and look at it from your internal perspective of knowing where the best place is for you and not thinking about what is going on the rumor mill?
Yeah, the only time I really pay attention, and even I don't even pay attention all that much. I can't say I do, but off season is when I pay attention. I'll look at the social media. I don't mind seeing the rumors and stuff like that. I think that part's kind of fun, seeing where you could possibly end up. But again, they're just rumors. For me, during the season, I try to limit as many distractions as I can, and I find myself early on in my career paying attention to Twitter and stuff too much, to where if you pitch well, everyone's like, yeah, you're the best. And if you struggle, you're the worst pitcher on the planet. They say nasty things. And early on, I felt like that kind of it got to me a little bit, but as I grew, especially as a Christian, I realized that I shouldn't be seeking man's praise, nor should I be offended when someone reviles me for my performance. In Peter, or I think it's First Peter 2, it says Jesus was reviled, but did not revile in return. Something along those lines. I'll probably brutalize that verse, but that's the idea, right? Is he didn't lash back, and when I saw that, I'm like, you know what? It's probably beneficial for me and probably a lot of other people just to not pay as much attention to social media during the season, because I don't want to be seeking man's praise. If I go out and I'm trying to feel myself and become ultra proud, and I don't want to have the negativity either. So let's just focus on the game and my family and my walk with Christ. So seeing the rumors though in the off season didn't really affect me too much. I actually kind of think it's fun fun to see that stuff.
Well, you talked about your Christianity. We've talked about that a little bit in the past. The question that I have, because this is really the first time that we've talked and your family has started to take shape. I think you have 2 little girls now, right?
Got 2 and a third girl on the way.
Third one on the way. So they are still young. Do they understand what dad does for a living?
I can't say they understand the full extent of it. I think it's just normal life to them, which is scary, right? This is going to sound ridiculous, but I remember when I was with the Cardinals, we were in the playoffs. In the first really fancy dinner, we're pretty simple people. We went out to a nice steakhouse, and we brought our 2-year-old Emmy with us. And so her first steak ever was a Del Frisco's $60 steak. We set the bar pretty high. But really, my point is they've been all over the road with me. They've lived in the hotels, when they come visit on the road, stayed in cities, apart from where we are in Jupiter. And to them, it's just normal. It's normal life. So I don't know if they know what goes on to the extent. It's just, they're just there with the family, and they, and we're just mommy and daddy just happens to play baseball. But I don't think she understands it's, Major League Baseball, which I actually prefer. I like my girls to hopefully remain humble the rest of their lives.
One of the big conversations throughout this year, and sadly it started with Kobe Bryant, the hashtag girl dad has been trending, and the support women in sports movement has been very, very important here during this entire year of a lot of different issues that we've had to deal with head on. With your girls continuing to grow up, what are you going to try to teach them about their value and their importance, not as a girl, not from a gender perspective, but from just a sheer importance perspective to what they can accomplish in society?
For sure. I mean, I strongly believe that we are made in the image of God. And so as image bearers of God, man, woman, we all deserve respect and honor. And, that's something I'm going to pour into my kids, it's Imago Dei. And it's especially this day and age, it's so important with everything going on out in society. They're going to be growing up into that. And so I'm going to just make sure that I'm going to have a household of little girls that love and respect their neighbor. And, we might have different definitions of love and respect, but, how I was raised by my parents was to respect other people. And they're going to for sure hear that from me, whether it's, my oldest daughter has to, have tough love with Avery, our younger, and then carrying that out to their friendships, or just, being an instrument of light in front of people that aren't believers in the world. And I think it's super important to teach the girls and my girls at that young age that we are made in the image of God. So you're to respect everyone that's in front of you, and they're deserving of respect because of that. So that being said, if they want to play sports, for instance, my daughter is into golf again right now. So she's only 6. I'm going to let her choose if she wants to continue to play golf with daddy, or if she wants to play soccer, if she just wants to, stay in school and, like she says, be a vet someday, or a dog trainer, I think it was now. It changes every day. You totally can do that. You're fully capable of doing that, and the Lord has given you a brain. And as you get older and as you develop, you're going to be able to, like I said, respect others and make those decisions. And so anything my daughters want to accomplish, I'm going to, do whatever I can to make that happen.
This has obviously been a strange year for everybody, but it has been, obviously particularly strange for athletes because you haven't been able to get into a normal groove. What was quarantine like for you? Because spring training had started. You had started to gear up. You had started to get ready for a season, and then you had to shut it down for a few months, not knowing when you would play again. What was quarantine like for you?
Well, on one side, quarantine was actually awesome because we got to spend so much time as a family. Whereas, I would be on the road, quite a bit during the season. Home road, splits, half the season, half a month. So, our family time was phenomenal. We got to spend some sweet time as a family, got to hang out. And, but on the flip side, training for baseball was a little difficult. A little might be an understatement, but for at least a month, I did everything at home. I borrowed some free weights from some friends of mine because they all sold out so quick. Just to get weights at your house was like impossible. I'm really good friends with a guy, Eric Cressy, who has pretty much helped me developmentally for the past 10 years in the gym. And, he gave me some equipment and some stuff to work on at home. And I threw into a net, for probably 2 or 3 months, however long it was till the season started. I was throwing into a net for the most part. So it was tough. It wasn't the same, obviously, as throwing to a person where you get that feedback. So unfortunately, I got into some bad habits. That's where the quarantine was bad. But just looking back on it, I'm still really thankful for it because of the amount of family time we got to spend together.
How would you describe playing baseball in 2020?
I'd say challenging. When you see, the Dodgers, obviously they won the World Series, and you look on the comment section, people are like, "Oh, congrats on your 60-game season," all that, stuff. It was probably the hardest season, I think, for any baseball club because of all the uncertainties that went on. Because when you're in quarantine, we didn't know if we were playing or not. So I was like, "Am I wasting my time like getting after it like this right now?" And your doubt creeps in the back of your mind. So you kind of go back and forth. You could go through the motions here and there if you're not careful. And I know going into that season, there were some guys that were really prepared and other guys that weren't. And, so for the Dodgers to be able to put it all together the way they did, and I think it was actually probably the most difficult season to win a World Series, in my opinion.
Obviously, I won't ask you about the decision to take Blake Snell out of that game, but baseball has changed drastically, I feel like, in the time that you have been a professional ball player. In your eyes, what have been the biggest changes in the way that the game is played?
I feel like it started back in 2016, maybe 17. It really took off of the basically technology in baseball. Guys started lifting homers like crazy in 16. When I was in, and you can look this up. I think this is facts. Safeco Field, which is historically a pitcher's ballpark, yielded the most homers in 2016 than any other ball field, which is insane. But we had Robinson Cano, Seager, and Nelson Cruz on our team, of course, but like other teams were hitting some massive bombs there. So for one, I feel like the baseballs actually changed that year. Now they're even more different. The seams are a lot bigger. The baseballs are harder. And they've proven that there's a lot less drag. I think it was like 10% less drag on the baseball when it's hitting the air. Couple that with launch angle. All the hitters are trying to launch the ball now. Everything's about hitting the ball in the air instead of putting the ball in play by any means. So you see a lot of strikeouts. But with the increase in homers, there's increase in strikeouts, but also increase in walks, because now guys like me can't pitch to contact anymore, because if we give up a homer, that puts us obviously in a bad spot. So whereas I used to just throw sinkers, sliders, and bottom of the zone trying to pitch to contact, now I'm throwing four-seamers up in the zone more than ever because I'm trying to avoid bats. So it's super high risk, high reward. So it's changed a lot, I'd say, over the last 4 to 5 years, to where now the pitching philosophy is completely changed. Obviously, the hitting philosophy has changed, and you just got to be more careful. So I think for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years, I've been kind of pitching against the computers because I'm not a high spin rate guy. And technically I can't get lefties out. as what I've been told, according to their computers. And so I've tried to make it a point to make those computers wrong.
I think when we talked in 2017, you mentioned the fact that you weren't a high analytics guy. I forget your exact answer, but you said that you rely much more on watching video than, as you mentioned, spin rate. Have you had to adjust who you are? I know you mentioned pitching up in the zone with a four seam, but how you've prepared as compared to where you were a few years ago when you would have to stray away from analytics.
Yeah, I mean, my every year. Well, baseball is a game of adjustments, right? I mean, year to year, there's always some sort of little adjustment I'm making in my approach. But the computer is huge for me in terms of watching video. Like, I spend a lot of time in the video room just making. If I feel good, I won't mess around as much. But when as a reliever, it's like a day to day. Like, I want to make sure everything looks the same. So, if I pitch in a game, the next day I'm in the computer room when I get to the field, like studying my mechanics, seeing where the pitch locations were the night before, and kind of going off of that. So that way, when I'm feeling like I'm out of whack, I know what to go back to. Does that make sense?
Yes.
To when I was, throwing well. So that was huge for me. So in that regard, that didn't change. The one thing I did pick up with analytics, and again, I'm not trying to bash it. I'm just saying there's definitely room for it. Like, I think it's great, but I think people overanalyze themselves with it and kind of get in their own head. But I noticed too that with the spins, for instance, I'm not as concerned with spin rate on my fastball, but I think slider is kind of a big deal for me. So I noticed 2019, my slider kind of fell apart the second half of the season, and realized that I wasn't spinning it as much. So the rotation wasn't the same. I wasn't getting the spin rate up. And that was because I was kind of getting around the ball. So if anything, spin rate taught me that mechanically something was wrong. And so then I diagnosed it there. So I think that's where it becomes beneficial. So if there was any changes, I would check that. If my slider didn't feel right on my hand, what's the spin number say? What's my extension? Oh, okay. And then I can kind of work mechanically to get those things back to where they need to be.
It's been such a long year, just in terms of how long it felt like each day has passed. I nearly forgot to ask about your contribution here to Carson-Newman, that you helped to fund the new turf at the Silver Diamond Baseball Complex. Why is it so important for you to give back to the program?
Oh man, I mean, it's extremely important to me. My whole career, like I said earlier, I've learned how to be who I am today, especially on the field, because of this school and because of Coach Griff, Coach Acord, the whole program really. And so it wouldn't feel right to kind of go throughout my career and not, do something like that to help. And, we try to be quiet about that stuff. I guess it's kind of hard when it's an entire infield, but I didn't even know where to begin. And I knew that Coach Griff was dying to get a turf field. And so I wanted to wait for for what I felt the time was right to do that. And so my wife was on board with it. We were so happy to be able to provide, to help out in that way. It's just for me to give back to the school that's given me so much. And, especially with Coach Griff, he took good care of me when I was in college. I was a very insecure college student, still learning about life, still learning about, obviously, baseball. And the fact that I was able to learn as much as I did, just even as a man that carried me today, I felt it absolutely necessary to give back and to say thank you.
I'll get you out of here on this. I mean, we could probably talk for another hour about some great memories over your career, but I'll get you out of here on this. What's the plan for the future? Obviously, the off season is hit, and there's a lot of questions to answer. What's next for you here in your career and in your life?
Well, that's a very good question. And I'll just be honest. This year was really tough for me from a baseball standpoint. Just physically, I just did not feel right. And it's just something I've kind of been dealing with over the years. This year just happened to really expose itself. And so right now I was kind of debating either retiring or giving it another year. So I got some ideas in mind. Right now I started training, so obviously I'm not completely saying I'm done with baseball. I love the sport, but I have a lot of things to still consider. My family being one. My daughter's in school. I don't really want to take them out of school or take them out of church. But, at the same time, I'm pretty close to hitting 10 years of service time in baseball, and my family's been encouraging me, or my wife's been encouraging me to possibly continue. So right now, just as a family, we're just being prayerful. I'm going to train like I always do. And if opportunity comes up that we think is right, then, we'll take it. But for right now, we're just thankful that we have that kind of freedom to choose and to be able to just enjoy the time that we have right now this off season as a family.
Yeah, and we're grateful for you to spend a little bit of time here with us on Mossy Creek Conversations. Thanks so much for the great stories, and best of luck with your next step.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on, and God bless.
That's Carson-Newman, former Carson-Newman pitcher Steve Cishek. He'll be inducted into the Carson-Newman Hall of Fame in February. I'm Michael Wattrang. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Mossy Creek Conversations.